Hello, welcome back. Today, I'm going to continue reading from my book, Sparrowmancer, and I know that is backwards. We are on chapter 4. So, let's get started. The clips were 3 days out. Scouts had seen them coming from the east. Spires went into lockdown. Sparrow tried to get out of the way. He stayed near the motor pool, installing fresh charge packs in his rifle and hoverbike. Rima came to him when he was done, and she found him looking east, holding his gold rifle toward the ground. "Are you ready?" she asked. "I'm always ready," he replied. "Well, how ready are you?" "Fully." Rima made a sound, a sigh. She moved her shoulders in a certain way, her face changing. Sparrow imitated her movements automatically. "Joy says this is an opportunity," she said. "She says we're lucky. We fall back to the city like we planned, and then we get these new plats to engage. The black chassis. If we're lucky, maybe we can put the clips in front of them. With our own platforms as vanguard?" Sparrow asked. Rima nodded. "We have maneuvers in place," she said. "This isn't the surprise it seems like. We've been waiting for this, actually." "I haven't been." "No, I thought you were always ready." "Maybe I misspoke," Sparrow said. "I'm always able. Ready isn't really part of it. I do what I need to do. That's all." "That's the way everybody is, Indy," Rima said. "We just grab on and hold tight." Jory also said to thank you for helping us. And I want to say that, too. And Apple was grateful. She and Pope. "It wasn't your fault. You know that." "I do," Sparrow said. "And even if it had been my fault, my objective doesn't change. Blame is nothing. Cast it on me. Cast it on the black chassis. We still have to fight what's coming." Rima put her hand on Sparrow's shoulder. "Everything is going into our platforms now," she said. "Come help me with mine." Sparrow went with Rima to the platform bays. Her platform was about half the size of Uncle. Its big cockpit was beneath a half-silvered acrylic bubble, with two long tread assemblies attached directly to its waist. It was essentially a humanoid platform torso welded on top of a tank. She'd painted its armor sunrise red. All it needed now were small parts, delimiters, plant feed lines, power couplings. Everything was in Rima's cache of scrap. Sparrow worked through the night with Rima and her crew, mostly in silence, getting the plat battle ready. They loaded RPG pods, calibrated sensor arrays, and tested control reactivity. It was hard, dirty work, and when they were finished, Sparrow ached all over. It was worth the pain to see Rima's plat looking mean and eager in its bay. Rima painted apple on its side in white. I call her Wolfie, she said. She's going to kick all kinds of ass. I'll do a rite of protection, Sparrow said. I'll do one for all the plats. Then we'll really be done. Rima and Sparrow sat outside the bay, watching the other pilots. Tob directed his crew from the cowled cockpit of his platform, Typhon. Leach, not yet a pilot himself, helped Rom assemble DPF cannon recoil compensators. Sparrow didn't know the woman who'd inherited Apple's platform, but Rima said her name was Siri. I've never seen anyone use Gone technology this way, Sparrow said. Before I came here, I thought it was impossible. It's just repurposing, Rima replied, pointing west toward the dead city. There were rangers headed for that border to watch for black chassis. Sparrow worried for them. Next, it will be houses and towns. Spires will be a city just like that one, but it'll be ours, and it'll be alive. The plat in it will be for defense, peace. Do you think peace can last? Sparrow asked, watching the detachment of rangers bound for guard duty on the city limits. Were they prepared for what was coming? I wonder if people really want peace. Sometimes, I think, what they really want is to crush other people. Even if it can't last, Rima said, peace is worth trying for. Spires spent the next days fortifying. Walls, spikes, and barbed tape went up around every building. Caltrops and kinematic field disruptors waited at every approach and at the threshold of every door. Teams raised crenellated towers of rusted iron. There were no gates or permanent walls around Spires. It hadn't been meant to be a fort when Jory had built it. And Jory wasn't a tactician. Spires prepared as best it could with what it had, which wasn't as much as Sparrow would have liked. Survival, if it was anywhere, was in the dead city. Everyone moved into the cramped, wet bunker. They all knew what to expect. The Clips had vehicle-mounted DEWs, and they used both Hovertech and ICE automobiles with pneumatic tires. Their infantry wore heavy combat frames, carried RPGs, and were frothing mad and ready to die. Sparrow had heard reports of energy saws, plasma cutters, nail guns, flamethrowers. The Clips made weapons of anything they could scrounge, and they left none maimed. Horror stories propagated in the cave. Sparrow wasn't sure what was true, but he believed that the Clips were bringing a siege. The makeshift plants would be Spires' best hope at stopping that siege before it began, and then driving the scattered clips into the dead city and the black chassis. Sparrow hoped that the clips were indeed all insane, that real, ravening hate would send them sprinting toward their graves. Sparrow's part was simple. He hated thinking about it. He tried not to count the time between reports of the approaching war party's position. Now they were near, and now they were nearer. The machine worshippers became huge in his mind, bigger even than the black chassis. He decided, therefore, not to rely on his mind. His heart was out too, because fear lived there. He became silent, sitting still as a stone in a too small bunk, with his legs crossed to keep his feet out of standing water. He waited without waiting. Then the last report came, and it was time to face chaos. He rode out into it, with nothing inside him but the knowledge of what he was supposed to do. The clips came in a big column and then spread out. There were hundreds of them, maybe thousands, maybe 1,000,000. They might have gone on forever, a whole dark continent of hate about to collide with spires where it sat exposed. Their infantry rushed in, and not all of them were in combat frames. Some of them were on foot, wearing gaunt armor painted yellow. Behind them were vehicles, big guns, leaders on rolling thrones. Last, behind the rear guard, there was darkness. Snipers fired at the clips from the iron towers. The platforms were out of their bays and waiting. From just behind the front line, Sparrow watched as Wolfie rolled out. His last clear thought was that Rima was probably howling with excitement in her cockpit. After that, though he strode to meet the enemy with his paragun thundering, the battle unfolded without him. The Clip war party advanced. Joy's forces met them. Fires broke out. Plumes of smoke and debris rose into the air. Sparrow felt his paragun jumping against him. He was aware for a moment when blood hit him, and then he was gone again. Several times the fighting forces clashed and withdrew, leaving more dead between them after each violent meeting. With every withdrawal, Joy's Rangers got a little closer to the dead city. ICEs roared, and sand swirled in kinematic fields. The high whine of old hovertech split the air between the thumps of particle fire. At one point, Sparrow hid behind a flipped truck. As he caught his breath, he saw Typhon burning. Tob was nowhere near his platform. Maybe he was dead inside it. Wolfie was still in the fight, trundling along with little fires crackling over her. The painted apple, having long been blasted off, by an infantryman's flamethrower. Sparrow looked from his hiding spot at the faces of the enemy. He was just aware enough to observe them. The clips wore tattoos of circuitry. Some of them had wires or other mechanical components pushed through their skin. But they were just humans, not monsters, not mad. He didn't hate them, and he didn't want them to die. He ran out and delivered them to death anyway, because that was what was happening. That was where he was, in brutality, in the teeth of chaos. Sparrow cast a cantrip for calm against the storm inside him. Then, something changed. Some of the DEW fire stopped, to be replaced by screams, metal tearing, and the tight pops of fuel cells bursting. Sparrow had come all the way back to himself to see what was happening. He ran across the battlefield and was surprised how far from spires he was. The clips had almost reached the dead city. Now something was emerging from the ruins, a platform unlike any he'd ever seen. It was huge, and its long neck held its head module high in the air. DEWs blazed from its sides, and black chassis ran between its four pillar legs. The dead city was attacking both armies. Neither side had been prepared. Nothing he had learned hunting plats had taught him anything. The Rangers' platforms hammered the long-necked Strider. It destroyed many of them with plasma bolts before it began to fall. The black chassis cut down everything they met at first. The Clips and the Rangers were forced to work together to repel them, crush them, ram them apart. Cars plowed into their throngs. Combat frames sawed through them. Sharpshooters felled them from atop the spires of rock for which Joy Settlement had been named. But the black chassis seemed inexorable. Sparrow swapped his spent ammo cells for 5 new ones and cut into the attacking platforms. He wasn't sure how many black chassis his paragun claimed before one got through. It tackled him, rolled with him on the ground, and tried to push the barrel of its gun arm into his mouth. Sparrow thrashed, gone again from his mind. Gone as the people who'd made these machines of death, if they hadn't made themselves. Somehow, he got his knife from his boot and into the marauding machine's black bubblehead. He twisted the hilt and pulled until his hands stopped gripping. The black chassis' neural motivator popped apart. Then, its synapses caught fire. Polyfluid poured down its blank face. Finally, it gave out and collapsed, offline. Sparrow rolled from beneath the black chassis. Then he tried to stand, but he couldn't, and he didn't know why. He crawled instead, clawing across the battlefield, with fire erupting around him. Dazed and slick with polyfluid, he dragged himself to a wrecked car. The vehicle had crashed after going over a KF disruptor. Who knew where its driver was? Far from chaos, maybe, looking up through dead eyes, ready to disappear. Sparrow lay back against the wreck and tried to remember what had happened. He looked down and saw that one of his legs was gone at the knee. The battle raged on. Then it began to shrink. At last, it finally died away. For a long time, the battlefield was silent. The dead lay with their eyes watching fires. A few flakes of snow fell on Sparrow, but it was still too warm for that. When he tried to touch them, they became nothing. There were no more platforms coming down from the dead city. And there were no more clips tearing across the field of battle in ancient cars. There were no more chainsaws throttling. There was nothing. And Sparrow wasn't sure how long the nothing lasted before he began to hear voices. People appeared with gurneys and pokes to take the wounded away. Sparrow allowed himself to feel relieved. They would come for him, but he had to get visible. He started to crawl again towards something that looked like his hoverbike in its paragon mode. He thought about the healing incantation, and he thought about the killing one too. Could he face the depths of despair again? How much would it have cost to kill all his enemies at once? There was no guarantee that he wouldn't have had to sacrifice his life for that spell. Death was a great magic. Only healing was greater. And he certainly couldn't pay for healing right now. He was hurt, weak, lost. There was no regrowing his leg. The infirmary was his only hope. Medical science was what he needed. Magic always let the darkness in. The searching voices found Sparrow. People leaned down, and he knew one of them, Jory. He reached for her, but she sneered at him. Her bold white line was gone. Now she mixed with everyone else. No one helped him up. All this time, Jory said. Sparrow thought her voice was pained. Take it to the city and leave it. All right. That's the end of chapter 4. I will continue with chapter 5 soon. Until then, thank you for listening and have a good day.